Welcome to the drawing board. I'm your host and in-house artist Erin Leffler. If you've joined me before here on the drawing board, welcome back. And if it's your first time with me, here's a quick rundown of what happens here on the show. Every episode of the drawing board, I invite guests from around the comics and entertainment industry, and we learn a little bit more about what they do. And while we learn about what they do, I'm also drawing them in real time. Pretty fun, right? Well, I'm so excited to introduce y'all to my guest this week because we have another animation guest, and I know how much you kiddos love animation working on such incredible things like Song of the Sea, which y'all know is one of my favorite movies. I am so excited to introduce y'all and let you get to know his work. Please welcome my guest, Claus Toksvig Kjaer.
Thank you for the introduction. Means a lot, and thanks for me to be able to join this. I have looking forward to this for the whole week, so very excited.
So happy to hear. For kids who may not be familiar with your work, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, okay, so I have a long period in animation. I started as an animator when I went to school. I went to animation school in Denmark. I have been working in the industry about 16 some years now. Of course, in the beginning, I didn't start out as producing. I started out as trying to animate on films. Back then when I started, it was CG wasn't really going on yet, so it was 2D animation, just like the Lion King and those films when they were really
Yeah.
popular. So we learned to draw on actual paper. We flipped those papers. Of course, the industry changed completely. I went into digital production and I went into digital 2D animation. And then 10 years ago, I started producing bigger films. And that was when I was talking with Tom Moore, and we decided it could be fun to collaborate on his second film. He just did Theodore Kells at the time, and he was so fortunate to get an Oscar nomination for that film. And then he had an idea for his next film, but he wasn't sure. And then we discussed, and it happened. It was really fun. And that took me on a new journey because on Song of the Sea, when I worked with Cartoon Saloon, I also met Remy Sayer, who was a really good layer, and he had an idea for Long Way North, which is another film that we co-produced afterwards. And now Calamity Jane, which is the same director, is also Remy. Yeah, so that's basically fast, I think, what I've done through the years.
That is awesome. And I love those films. Those are some of my favorites. And I know there's a lot of my kiddos out there who love that as well. So thank you so much for your work on those. Those are really cool. Um, you don't have to carbon date yourself because I always tell everyone that. But how long have you been doing this for?
As in the whole entire animation thing, 16 years, I think.
Wow, that's
Maybe
awesome.
almost 17. It's hard to, yeah. But I started working as a production assistant. Then I worked before. Well, I started as an animator, but then I moved on to production because I thought that was a bit more like fun for me to do those things. Even if I know a lot of people think that's the worst you can do in animation, be creative. But I think you can be very creative in production. So I love that. And then I've been on to become production managing, and I worked on some series before I developed my own studio. And of course, doing your own studio has an advantage that you can choose what projects you want to do. Whereas when you work for someone, which is totally fine, but then you obviously have to do what the studio is doing. So I found the freedom when I had my own company. I could pick and choose the projects that I felt I had an attachment to versus just being on a production, which also, of course, can be fun, but I never picked those. Of course, those were picked by executives of that studio. So I think that's the huge difference from having your own space, basically.
Absolutely. Now, I love getting to ask this question because there is a variety of answers, especially within the art industry when it comes to this. Do you think that going to schooling for this is necessary, or do you think that kids can kind of learn these things in their own way outside of a structured setting?
Well, you mean animation as a general, or you mean producing? Because I think,
Bit of both.
yeah, because in animation, sure, there are lots of schools. Now, our studio had a lot of super talented interns from also from Canada and the US, mostly from Europe, of course, because it's easier to travel to Denmark from Paris or London. Or so animation has lots of opportunities. I feel in production, it's really difficult. Well, there are film schools. I guess you can be you can take a diploma in producing at a film school, but animation is such a specific trade that I've actually yet to see a school that really, educates producing, like in animation producing, not live action film making. So the way most people learn is the way I learned it was you work in the industry and then you work under somebody and then you get experience working under these producers, and then one day you can, produce a short film or you can become a line producer and then you get more experience that way. Um, so animation, there are lots of schools. I feel in production it's harder. But maybe that's
Awesome.
about to change because I know more people they do these master classes these days where they do invite some really top producers and they give them 2 weeks of knowledge. That's something I know is happening, but I haven't seen a degree yet of being an animation producer. That's something that I still need, to see.
Awesome. And that's really cool to know too, because I love getting to hear like you can learn hands-on tools and stuff when it comes to animation, especially within the art side of it, because there's a lot of people who maybe don't learn so well in a structured setting. So it's cool to know that there's different ways that you can learn these things.
Yeah, and I also felt like right now, well, this has been the craziest last year, I think, in a long, long time. And also still this year, we're still struggling with the COVID-19 restrictions worldwide. And I feel like, well, now more than ever, it's become evident that, the digital space is important. That's how we learn now. I mean, you have these platforms, you have animation professionals who, Aaron Blaze is one, a friend of mine who's really good at, doing online teaching and teach people how to use tools that they can do when they're painting. Or I mean, when I started, because it was a completely different way because the internet wasn't fully developed like it is today. Right now I feel like so many possibilities, and so many people are willing to give, and they don't charge a lot, and most of them are even free, right? So
Oh yeah.
it's completely changed the whole landscape. Not saying that it's not nice to go to a good school and learn that school. I feel that that has its values too, but I also seen students that I met who never went to a school who are amazingly good at, and they just learn it through various online courses and stuff like that, and then working on their own work at home or something like that.
Absolutely. Now, bit of a fun question for you because I love getting to talk about this anytime I've gotten to talk with kids. It seems like they all have the same question, which I think is kind of funny, but I guess when the media makes it seem that way, it's kind of widespread. They think that because of how social media and just the media in general portrays it, that the only way to be good at a job is to only do a job all the time and nothing else. But we're human, we have so
Right.
many other likes and interests. So for you, do you have any hobbies, and do you find that hobbies actually help you be better at your job?
Well, I'm one of those who actually really strongly believe in versatility. That yes, of course, it's you need to work hard on something to be good. It's of course that's the key, but it can also be. I mean, sometimes I feel too much because you need to set aside sometimes your mind to be able to excel the fullest. Sometimes I feel like I can't see when I work on a film. Sometimes I'm like, it's really difficult. You're stuck. It's like writer's block. You get those periods in time where you worked years and I'm saying, okay, I need to work harder, but it doesn't work. So sometimes I need to actually take a break to get back into that space, if that makes sense. So I think hobbies are really
Absolutely.
important. I think it's important to have something to, because let's just face it, animation is for most people their passion. When you do your passion as your work, it can be a little bit overwhelming. It can also be a little bit I don't know, persistence is not the word, but it's kind of takes over you over.
Yeah.
I have friends and family who, and that's totally great, and that's how they like to do it. They have a job because they wanna pay the rent, and they took the job because that's what they want to give, and then they want to go home at 4. I never go home at 4. That's not possible because we're in filmmaking. There's always something to render out. There's always something to do. There's always a scene that could be improved. There's always an actor who could do the voice in a different way. you keep creating because it's creative medium where I don't just punch in and out. So I'm not looking down on that. I'm just saying it's a completely different way of choosing. And when we choose animation, that you keep creating, and it's just, I think it's important. Like you said, to have maybe, a hobby. And I know a lot of people in our studio do yoga.
Oh, wow.
Because when you sit in front of a computer, I mean, if you're an art director and you sit every day and you do your art, I mean, that could be fine when you're 20s, in your 20s, 30s. But when you turn in 50s, 60s, and you want to keep doing this for as long as you can, I've unfortunately seen a lot of people with injuries. And I even seen some people who can recover those injuries and now they can't work in the industry. So I feel it's very important to take care of you because there's only one who will do it, not you, right? So, and funny enough, when I talk about this, I feel a lot of people saying, well, yeah, we have a busy day. Yeah, we have to do this. And it's the first thing you cut off. That's the yoga practice, but it's actually should be not the first thing you cut off because that's the thing that keeps you, I also feel like when I run or if I walk or do something, I have more energy to do the work. So it is about finding a balance, definitely for me. And finding a way where, of course, I work hard, but I also want to I don't want to take my mind aside and do something else. And it's really healthy to focus on that too. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to put it too, is finding a balance, because that is a lot of times where things in the industry get totally out of whack because there is no balance in things sometimes. And that's probably the best way to go about something, is having balance. So definitely a good thing to keep in mind with that.
Yeah. We want to do, I mean, I don't know anybody in the industry who doesn't want to do their best, right? Because it's something that most people who do animation, they have known since they were small. And that's a very different thing that, taking education and now at 16 or 18, I know what I want. So that's where it becomes it's really hard to go home from your work, when you're doing animation, because it's not really work. I don't feel like a lot of people feel like, oh, this is just my hobby and I get paid. But that's also the danger. The danger lies in that, because then you don't switch off at, which you should punch in and out sometimes, I guess. So yeah, it's an interesting field of work for sure.
I kind of feel like along with that also goes with like setting boundaries, because if you're doing that all the time and you don't set a boundary and tell people this is my time where I don't do it, then you could possibly be putting yourself in more danger of ending up doing it all the time as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You need to sometimes take a break, obviously. And also in between projects, I know a lot of producers who, obviously we do many developing projects at the same time because we never know when they're going to get financed. And we do it because we don't want to go, 2 years without a job. Makes sense. So we try to finance, and then, but sometimes what happens is that when you do this, you don't control all of that. So sometimes you get two films at the same time. And that's not exactly what you wanted, and it's not exactly healthy, but it's the only way now that you can do it, because otherwise the funding gets pulled. Or you get like, now two happen at the same time, and now I'm going to wait 6 months for the next one. So you definitely need to, what do I usually say to myself, that you don't have the same day. Like some people had know their work day. I never usually know mine. At least I know what I'm doing in overall, but I don't think, that's why I'm saying it's such a different trade than anything else, I guess, that you could do for a living.
The good thing about it is we can always say it's never a boring job. You always have something fun that's going to happen.
It's never boring, for sure. It's always something, and there's always something to do or something to create or make better, for sure.
Now, you've gotten to work with a bunch of amazing people in the industry, and you've gotten to work with your own studio, which is absolutely incredible. Was there anyone when you were growing up, though, who was really inspiring to you within the field that made you want to pursue the career?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up like so many other colleagues of mine, and watched films like Studio Ghibli. I watched a lot of those Miyazaki's films, obviously. inspired a lot of 2D animators today. My Neighbor Totoro, Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, Castle in the Sky, all those films that, Spirited Away. I mean, even Disney animators I know of, I've watched these films 50 times, and even if they do CG, right? So I think we all look towards something that, also culture-wise is we don't have here. That's why it's exciting because it's not our culture, and that's why I find it magical, maybe. And when we did Long Way North, we were really lucky because especially that film, I don't know why, but that really translated to a Japanese audience somehow. And when he was alive, unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but Isao Takahata, who was the co-owner of Studio Ghibli with Miyazaki, he saw the film and he contacted us and invited the team to Ghibli to show the film to the animators in Japan. And then after, he was so hyped about the movie that he actually went to some Japanese theaters himself while we went home afterwards. And then he showed the film and he did the introduction of the film for some cinemas in Japan.
Oh, wow.
So we have been really lucky sometimes where I would never think I would ever meet him. I would never think that he would ever be interested in something we did. How would he even see it? He's so busy making his wonderful films. And yet he saw it somehow. So you never know these things where, when you do animation, we all somehow connected because we do, we can all connect with the art somehow. And then they looked at that for, that's beautiful. Guess who did that? And also it's a French-Danish film. And then, they figured it out. So one of our animators, when we went there, were completely shocked, of course, because they were all there and we all looked up to them. So it's, yeah, definitely.
That is incredible.
And of course, Disney, right? I also grew up with Disney films like everybody else.
Yeah.
I can't, deny that. I watched Fantasia and all those films when I grew up. 101 Dalmatian is probably one of my favorite Disney films of the old ones. And
wow.
and yeah, and unfortunately, you can't get to meet Walt because he passed away even before I was born. But I went to the studio several times now, and also are friends with a lot of these people, and that was of course also really interesting to see how they work because they have completely different way of working, yet we do the same thing. So yeah, it's really funny. Yeah.
That is so cool. And I love that you brought up Studio Ghibli because not a lot of my artist guests on here have brought that up. And that's one of my favorite studios. I think they have such beautiful films, which if none of you kiddos are familiar with Studio Ghibli, I highly suggest going and checking them out because they have some of the best animated films out there that you could see.
Oh yeah, no, they're so good. I think I have the whole collection somewhere because I had to watch them, and now I think they're on Netflix, so now you can watch them online. But now they're magical. I mean,
oh, definitely. Now, I'm sure running a studio is a lot different than just doing the animation side of it. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that's like?
the fun part of that, I think, like like I mentioned before, besides deciding a project, which I think is the biggest thing, because when you decide, it's kind of yours. But working with a team that you also put together, I think is super satisfying in a way. When I worked in the industry before, it's not that there wasn't great teams before. When I worked in, there were, but obviously those were hired, and I was hired, and now you're in the mix, and luckily people are nice and friendly, and it's. But when you have a studio, you actually, it's like having a football club, I guess. You actually set the team, and that is a very, I mean that as much fun as it is, it's also a challenge because you need not only to just pick people. Of course you say, okay, the best people. That's not really how it works sometimes. You also need to find the right chemistry. You need to find the right balance. The proper team can do whatever it takes, and a wrong team struggles, with if you don't feel that people have their back, and they don't feel comfortable. That's we're just humans, we're not robots. So I feel like that's the biggest responsibility I have, is trying to find people who are doing artistically different things, and now you have to work together for 2 years. You're not even from the same culture. Sometimes, 5 comes from France, 2 from Portugal, 1 from Italy, and you all need to basically, form a friendship and do this film together, which is a lot to ask for, actually. I know we never do that because that's just, oh, I need a job, let's work. But basically, that's what you're asking people to do, is like leave home, go to a completely different country, work on this project together with completely, a team of strangers I never met. The only thing we have in common is we like to draw, or we like to, watch animated films. So luckily, most of the times, people are friendly and nice, but you also need sometimes people who really ambitious, just like you need people who are really calm and relaxed. It's a very fun combi of people to make that dynamic work.
Cool. That is really awesome. I've never even heard it from that standpoint, so it's fun getting to hear that. It also seems like that could be a little bit challenging. Do you guys ever have issues with language barriers when you have people coming in from all over?
Absolutely. I mean, luckily, most people who have college or went to school, they can speak English in a good enough sense so you can actually communicate and work on a feature film. I think we're also lucky because in animation is not the biggest, beside the director who gives notes, and you need to understand, we don't spend a lot of time, sitting debating stuff. If you're an animator, you need to understand the scene. But once you do that, you dig in, and then you are, for weeks, you're sitting there trying to find the emotions and trying to find the tone and the scene before you show it to a director, where lots of other trades you need to communicate constantly. So I think that helps too. You don't need to be your best at that way, but obviously it helps the more you speak. Sometimes the talent speaks for itself. Also, sometimes went on a limb and I hired somebody because there was just pure raw talent there, but they really didn't speak a lot of English. And so I took a chance and said, we need this artist because look at that. Can you, and I talked to the director, can you handle that with, you need to spend more time with this? And sometimes it's, yeah, sure, no problem. And if I feel like, no, we really need to, okay, then we might need to hire somebody who's more fluent, you know. Also, depending if you're a supervisor, then you need to be fluent because you need to communicate more in your role. So it really depends on your role as well, how much you need. But generally, I feel there's a lot of people that can speak English really well enough to be in this medium for sure. This is good.
Awesome. It's good to know that it's a highly collaborative thing. So it's good for people who are good with others, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what we do, I guess a lot of the action happens on the computer screen. So, a lot of that you communicate on the screen, which I think is why you don't need sometimes to be at your best with the, of course, if you're from Italy and you also speak French, sometimes it's hard to, it's hard to learn 3 languages, let alone, so I understand if that's a struggle for some, but luckily, like I said, a lot of people, they communicate through the art. They show the director points, say, no, it has, okay, and then you actually understand it better. I think we're such a visual media, and that is cutting a lot away of the communication, which is, you would be needed in another workplace, probably. Yeah.
So I'm sure that you know this from firsthand experience, and I love getting to talk about this because I think it's something that's important to talk about. Is when it comes to the industry, especially, it's a highly competitive industry, and it's a little challenging at times for people to get jobs. Do you think a kid should focus on being only competitive when they're coming into the industry? Or do you think that they can find a healthy balance between competition and being able to make friends with people who do the same jobs as them and learn from them?
I do. I think you can do that. Um, I feel like I said, when you put a team together, when you're actually in charge, and I know all the people who own studios out there think the same way now, because you want, basically, we all have the same goal. We want to make the best movie possible. The only way you can make the best movie possible is that if you get along, and you don't spend the energy on the wrong things. So the least thing I want is to have people not getting along, and then we all gonna suffer the complications of that, and then the movie also is gonna suffer. So I think there's a lot of focus on, you know you can be ambitious, which is good, and I think you should, because that's also what keeps you going. but it's not that alone. I also look, besides, like I said before, talent is great to have. I always had more talent drawing, but that's why I switched to producing. I didn't. There were so many better students in my class who just were miles ahead, and they were younger than I was, and you could just tell that they just never struggled. They just could always find that moment where I could do the same, but it took me 2 weeks to get there. And of course, when you have that talent, that's a good start, but it's not everything. Because I also seen people with lesser talent, taking on an amazing job because maybe it's not enough. You also need your personality. You need to be somebody who can collaborate. This is a teamwork. You can't be too egocentric. I mean, it's not good for the production. I mean, you need to collaborate with director, the writer, producer, everybody basically. So yes, ambition is good, but it's just as good to understand, I think, the function in the, and the people. And once you understand that and know what each other is doing, and you can work together, like, then everything just disappears, and you don't even have to struggle to get where you want. I also have a really fun example, because there was, when we did, I think it was Long Way North, when we started Long Way North, this never happened before. It was insane. We had 17 applications for animation positions, and we got 600. So there were 600 applying for 17 spots, which never happened before. I think they just loved the style of it. So we actually said, let's just interview all of them, because we want to see if we can put the best team together of all these 600 people and a lot of people were like, let's say, just a lot better on their portfolio than we actually ended up hiring. We ended up hiring some people who could work together and who understood that, if we do this together, this will be a great film, that kind of thing. Instead of saying, I want to do this, I want to have it this way, and I'm going to show my art, and then project comes second. We chose a lot of team people. And when we did that, I said, okay, these are probably some of these are 10% weaker than some of the one we could have hired. But what happened was 2 or 3 months in the production, the weakest one of those were actually better than the most experienced one on the team. So that also shows that once you give somebody a chance, sometimes they really pull through, and they really, take that to the next level, which I thought was really crazy to see. And that didn't show in the portfolio. That was just the hint after doing 3 or 4 interviews with them, that we really like the personality, we like the person. And of course, that also helps. So I think it's a combo of a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Ambition can get you somewhere, but you also need to, have your personality with you. And yeah, it's a fun trade of stuff that is a combi of being a great artist. I think it's great.
Absolutely. And I think hand in hand with that, I love talking about rejection as well, because like you said, a lot of applicants will put in jobs, put in their portfolios for a job, and not everyone gets chosen. And even putting our work online these days, if it doesn't get the reaction that we expect it to, that kind of feels like a sort of rejection as well. Do you think that rejection is something that should be taken personally, or is it something that kids can use more as like a learning tool?
I mean, I definitely, I don't know how, I mean, I guess it's individual how you want to look at it, but I always chose to, from my point of view, to look at it completely from a non-personal, because I know that somebody who doesn't even know me rejected me, and I have a really hard time to take, of course it's never nice to be rejected, but I have a hard time, saying, okay, because he doesn't know who I am. So it's also really weird to say, hey, why, so it becomes that thing. I have a lot of friends also that are into acting, because being a producer, I need them sometimes to do the voices and stuff. And if you're an actor, I think you gotta be in the most competitive space ever, because you always offer a role, and then there are like 1,000 other ones who want the same role. And a friend of mine who's a really great actor in Denmark said, well, you can never take it personally, because sometimes you're not rejected because you're not a good actor. That's what people think when they first start with inexperienced. They think, oh, they don't want me because I'm not as good as an actor as this guy or this girl or this. But the thing is that sometimes you just don't fit the role. And it's not about you. It's about you couldn't play a 60-year-old, blah, 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 or you couldn't play this, or you couldn't play, or you don't have the physique, or you don't have something like, and that's totally nothing personal. This is just the way it is. They're looking for a different profile. And so I know sometimes when you're really hungry for jobs, you want this job so badly, but then you reflect on things and you see, okay, maybe it was also a good thing that I wasn't taken because I couldn't have done that part as good as the person who actually ended up doing it. And then you're gonna get the right part because there are lots of chances, you know. And I love that idea that you can't hold too strong on something that was not yours to begin with. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
it's very difficult to blame somebody for. Of course, you can be sad. I totally get it because when you want something, I get it. It's not fun, but I try to be more pragmatic about it and say, okay, maybe because I can also be rejected when I have some film I want to do and the financier says, no, we'll take this film because we think this is more, you know, this has more appeal to the target group or whatever thing they will say. And I'm like, man, this is the best script I think we ever done. Why? I mean, but then again, it's nothing really personal. I think they just really like that script. So good luck. And then I'm gonna take it somewhere else and try, you know. There will be lots of rejections, you know, even us, even with the history we have built today, we still get rejections. You know, it's not like we walk into, you know, Netflix and they'll say, great, here you go, here's the money, you do it. It's a lot of work still. They still ask us all the tough questions. They still ask us all the same things. Like if I was being interviewed, right? So I'm always on the stand. I'm always like feeling like I'm auditioning because, you know, why is that interesting? Why do you want to do that story? You know, how long would that take? Why do you need to spend this much money? I mean, it's the same. So I think auditions will be part of our lives in the world we live in right now. You know, so I don't think that part will go away. So the sooner you adapt to that reality, I guess the easier it becomes to take rejections. Um, and also, here's the greatest thing ever. So you can also be rejected and get the dream job. And had you not been rejected, you would not have gotten that job. This is what I realized. Like, because I've done the same thing where I couldn't get in on this film. And 2 weeks after, I got a phone call saying, hey, do you want to produce this pilot for this series? And I thought, if I said yes to the other job, and this is much cooler, this one, I would not have been able to do. So it's a very, you know, nobody can see the future. So I guess then it would be easy. But there are also new opportunities out there when you think there is none, right? So it's an ongoing thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that fact too that you still face it no matter what point in your career is.
Oh,
I
man.
think that's important to remember because
Yeah.
we often take it so personal when we're first starting out. We think that, oh,
Yeah.
once I make it, you know, everything's
No.
going to be fine, but it continues all throughout the career.
It does. It's something that never. I also had the same idea as you had. I thought, oh, once I did this film and that film, now they'll just make what it. No, that's not how it works. Unfortunately, they're still super critical as they should be. They're still really because it's an investment for them. Right? I don't understand. It's not your money, so I mean, they really want to make sure that what they put in will be of service to somebody, and they will find an audience. And a lot of people say, oh, you know, yeah, it's mass productions and they don't care about. Well, actually, it's actually also not true. I think they really try to find, you know, where the money is spent the best way, because they could do another show if it wasn't yours.
Yeah.
So if they bid on the wrong thing, then okay, that sucked. So I do also try to find a perspective when I'm rejected, saying, okay, looking it back, I do understand why they chose, because sometimes I see, oh, that's the one they chose, you know. And then I see it, and then I watched it on Netflix, let's just say that, 3 years after. And I'm like, now I get it. I understand why they picked that over my project, because that's really cool, you know.
Absolutely.
And maybe
Now
that
I'm
inspires
sure,
us to do better. Yeah.
yeah,
Then I need to do a better thing, because if, to get in there next time and then get it,
absolutely. I think that's a great thing to keep in mind too, is that it can always inspire you as well when you get rejected to
Oh
do
yeah.
even better work. So definitely awesome piece of information to remember. I'm sure that going in for a pitch though isn't the easiest thing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how a pitch goes? Because I'm sure that a lot of kids who are watching this may not know the process.
It depends, I would say, because no studio, it's not like there's a recipe for that's how you do, or this is what they want to see. Of course, there was crossover questions of similar things most people want to hear about. Of course, you need to present the story. They want to know the universe. Um, what I realized was really funny thing that I thought, and I don't know if, because this maybe doesn't apply to every studio out there, but sometimes you don't need to have everything thought out. When I usually in the old days did a pitch, I wanted to be so much prepared that I could answer any question that they had. And then I realized when I went into the pitches that that's actually not sometimes what they're looking for as well, because whoever picks this up, they also want to be partners with you. So if you have, they want to make it better together. So if you have all the questions already, and I guess what's their role gonna be, right? So they can really work with you, because they didn't want to just buy it from you and then make it themselves. If they want to collaborate, you don't need to have all the answers sometimes. That's what I realized. It's great to have, of course, the universe thought out, the mythology, the characters that they're gonna ask those questions, um, and the arcs of the character, and who's the bad guys, who's the, or if it's that kind of story, or who's the. I think the most important thing I get asked most times is, why do you want to do it? Like, and that's really tough when you get that the first time, because nothing about the characters. That's nothing about the show. That's nothing about the film. But I think that what they're looking for is your commitment. So they're saying, why should I invest in you? Why do you want to do it? And if you don't have a good answer for that, I guess then you're in trouble. So, and it's a tough one to answer, because you have to have thought about why do you want this so badly? Why not something else? And they're looking for that kind of commitment and passion, that they know, okay, if we take this on, you're not going to drop it. You're not going to be 6 months in and then I can't do it. Or this is something you want to do, whatever it takes. And okay, and sometimes, in the beginning, of course, I don't have all the answers for that either, but I thought about it. The more that I think about it, it's not such a bad question. I guess I would ask the same if I was in their position, why does this mean so much to you? That, you know, and if you can say, well, it does because, this is something that maybe inspired by a family thing, or, if you can answer something like, and if, because then it's dear to you, that it's not just something you're doing and then you're gonna drop the ball if you get stuff.
Absolutely. Now, a couple more questions for you. These ones are some of my favorites because I feel like they're more lighthearted, but also show that, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to learn
Oh yeah.
lessons. So for you, we all have little blips and moments throughout our career where maybe something didn't exactly go to plan or we made a little goof up, but it ended up being a funny story later on. Do you have any moments like that in your career you could tell us about?
Like funny moments with the industry people, or what do you think?
Yeah, anything like that.
Oh man, there must be plenty. um because, but like, I feel like it's so long time since I traveled, because we've been on I haven't been back to the States since, this is 1 year ago yesterday that
Oh,
I was back
no.
in LA. And I usually in LA 5 times a year, but of course I can't go now because of the restrictions and stuff. So yeah, there must be many. Oh man, okay, first time I think that I met Chris Sanders, obviously you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Chris Sanders is somebody I never met until 8 years ago. When I first time I think I met him 8 years ago. And when you don't know somebody, but you know who they are, and they're very, he's very famous for his characters, and he's done great stuff. Like he's also director and stuff. And the funny thing is, I didn't know at the time when I met him that you know I wasn't as good as, let's say, networking. That's another trait. If you're a producer or something, you gotta network with people because that's your job. You need to get people inspired about your project. You need to, and 8 years ago, I was just starting producing. It's 10 years. When I was 2 years in, it's not the same. So it took me some time. And I wasn't the best networker at the time. So I didn't know. So there was those, so I meet him and there is awkward pause because he's not speaking a lot either at that time. But there's nobody else there. So we're just standing there. And then I asked, can I see your portfolio? Because at least that's something I can say, right? And then he has like 3 of them or something, and they're huge. And I start looking, and while I'm looking through it, I'm thinking, I'm not an artist anymore. What I really want to ask him is more like industry stuff and, work related. It's not really about the portfolio, but now I'm gotten to this point. So I can't just close it either and say, you know what, I really want to see your portfolio. I really want to talk about the industry. But I have this problem, and I know there's going to be a lot of people, and they want to talk to him. So maybe only have 5 minutes, and I'm walking the portfolio, and it's like, oh man, how to get out of this? And then I see a drawing where there's a surfer person, and as soon as he switched to surfing, because that's apparently his passion, he can't stop talking. So sometimes you also gotta find what inspires people. But I'm like, of course, this is the first time you meet somebody you really, really look up to, and then it's just awkward pause. That's not what I had in mind. So of course that was a bit weird. But after that, the surfing talk was great, and then we could talk about other things. But you need to break the ice somehow because they don't know you. You don't really know them. You just seen what they do. So I understand that not everybody is, Glenn Keane is amazing to talk with, no matter who. You probably met him, right? So he can talk to anyone, but not everybody is like this. Because a lot of artists are shy, or a lot of artists are not saying Chris is shy, actually, now that they know, talk to him, but he's not shy. But sometimes that thing where before you get there, and now next time you meet them, it's going to be easier. And now you have the story, and now you can talk to them. But the first time is tough, and that can be awkward, obviously. I think, did I have another? Yeah, but most people, that's what I feel in animation. People are really, really friendly. I rarely had a situation with any animation person they wouldn't want to talk to you. I've also been, live action is different, obviously, because I understand some people want to protect themselves from getting used, or, if you're famous, it's tough that way because you never know why somebody wants to see you. Is it for, publicity, or is it for, I think we're lucky because the famous people are the people we draw. And we can go down shopping any day and nobody will harass us, but we still do stuff for the screen. The friends of mine that act, they can't do that. They can't even walk 5 meters without getting recognized, right? So it's a completely different world. I feel like yet we're in the same industry, and I always say to the people who dub my films or do the voices and they're famous, I'm saying, this film, if you do your best job, you won't be remembered for this because the famous person is this character, right? That's the, but if you do it perfect, and then you marry the character, then you won't be remembered because then it works. And then of course you're on some name on a poster, but that's not what they look for, right? And of course, if it's bad dub, then you will be remembered because then it's not, and that's not what you want. So, and they always laugh and say, yeah, it's true. And they love it because they can come in their pajamas and do the dubbing. They don't need to dress up or anything. And they can do any day of the week, like any time, and you just record it and it's great. I think there's some loose thing about being free that way. You don't need to live in a trailer, 5,000 miles from your home, 3 months because you have this role now. It's very relaxing. I have a lot of fun with doing the voices actually, because people
That
are
is
super chill when they do it. Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Now, one
It's
last
not super.
question for you.
Sure.
My favorite one of the entire episode, because it kind of takes everything, ties it up in a nice bow, pulls it all together and everything. Well, before I get to that, I have to ask, because we've been in quarantine for quite some time now. We all have different projects we're working on, whether professionally or just personally. Are there anything that you're working on now or previously worked on that you want to share with us?
We do. I mean, right now you're right. This pandemic has been challenging. Animation, we're lucky because we can actually still work. I have a lot of friends again in live action. They can't work if the crew's too big, and there's restrictions and stuff. So we can still do our stuff with either from home or from like with distance. And we have some project in development which you can do with artists that are not even in the same country right now, where we, through a network, have a script we wrote 3 years ago, trying to get that ready to be pitched. So we have a package. We are working on. We're closing a production right now, which is a feature film. I can't reveal which one because some of these things are like a lot of contracts and you can't say until it's out. Which I wish I could actually, because it would be really cool. But yeah, so we are doing stuff at the moment. One is a feature film we're finishing up, and we have a film in development we're trying to get ready for pitching. We have two actually we're trying to get ready for pitching. So that's fun. But animation is like baby steps, you know that, right? So it takes a while before it's ready to be shown. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay, so now last question. If there's a kid right now watching this, a young adult or even an adult who is now interested more in getting into the industry or just wants to learn a little more, what do you think the one lesson they should walk away from watching this is?
If you want to get into the industry, yeah, good question actually. I mean, well, like I said, well, it helps. Obviously, if you're in this, you have a passion for the art somehow, one way or the other. Maybe, I mean, when I started, there wasn't a lot of education you could take besides animation. Today, there's lots of people know today. I mean, you can end up in storyboarding. You can end up in maybe think of, because it's nice to not just do one thing, because that's maybe, I don't know, not too risky, but like then you really have to make sure that's what you want. Because I know a lot of people who thought they wanted that, and then they work 5 years in industry and they're like, no, I can't do it anymore. I want to do this one now. And now they're starting, but they decided, and now they're going for that. So maybe figure out what kind of excites you, because I'm sure you have an idea. If you're more of a storyteller, then you are like an acting person. Like I know there's story in both, but there's a big difference of an overall story, or you just love to get nerdy in a scene and make that character come to life. I mean, for me, that's really different. And also, if you like a lot of pressure, if you love pressure, then obviously directing is easier, because you're going to oversee so many different, and pressure is going to be your friend because you're going to have a lot of pressure. Also from financiers and producers, right? The same goes for producing. I would say this: if you don't like talking to people, and you're more of a loner, and you don't want the pressure, don't be a producer. Like, because the first thing you need to do is convince people to give you money to do something, and if something goes wrong, the same people is gonna haunt you, right? So you need to be able to work with these people, and you can't say I have a bad day, I can't talk to you. Like, they need to be able to call you anytime they want to call you, because that's the deal you make once we're together. It's like a marriage that way. So I think it's more based on your personality. I think I learned it the hard way. I think I wish I would have known that. That is not, I mean, you can love something, but if you can't do these 7 things, it's going to be very tough for you to do it. like, it's then you can dream all you want about it, but it's not going to be easy. The other way around, if like, you want this thing and you match all 10 of the things, of course you're going to have an easy way to excel that way because it's natural for you, you know. And the last thing I wish I've known is it's not about being the best, because then I would never have made it. Seriously, it's not about being, the best in you. I was certainly not the best in my class. Let's just say that I was not. And not when it comes to art or it comes to, all these things. I learned a lot on the way. I guess I wasn't afraid of, um, you know, I wasn't afraid. I guess that counts for more, because a lot of people I know, they're super talented, but they're super scared of showing people their stuff, or which is normal. But not being afraid is actually really good in this field, because that makes people see you and then they understand what you can do. If you're very close to your, with everything, it's going to be tough to get to know what you can do. And it's also going to be tough for you to collaborate. So those elements are not really about being a great artist. Those are more personal things that actually maybe define you in the end, and those become great artists, because they're not afraid. They can do what they feel is right when the time is right, and they can fight for what but they also can work in a team, and they, those things I think are more personality bound than actually about being a great animator, a great concept artist, or a great, that can come. But like I said again, if you have too many things that kind of fight against that, it's not going to be very easy to break through that wall, right? I mean, that's something I wish I'd known earlier.
That is a
Because
great lesson.
yeah. So it's less to do with animation, more to do about you, right? And then you're not compromising, because if you thought about this in your early years, which I wish I had found out later, then it all kind of works out for itself, because then it comes natural to you, everything basically. When I found this job, I had it much more easy than when I struggled trying to be an animator, right? So that's something that, I guess they don't tell you in animation school, that you if the more you work with yourself, the more you actually get to know where your strengths are, what and where your passion also is. It's very hard to become good at something you don't like, right? I mean, that's gonna be really hard. That's like something, you can do it, but it's kind of an inspiring date on that. Some can do it for 5 years, some can do it for not even 2 weeks. That's never a good solution. Find something that you simply cannot, you not even how much you try, you cannot stop doing it. That's going to be easy for you to excel in. Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope you kiddos out there learned a lot from that, because I know I certainly did. That was a great episode. Now comes my favorite part of the episode, where I get to show you what I was making of you over here. I'm going to warn you ahead of time that my studio lights do like to mess with the colors on the screen. So I will send you an actual one after the show, but I'm going to try my best to get this up in here.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. That's cool.
So much for
really
coming on the show. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you again so much for coming on, and thank you again to everyone who tuned in. Again, I'm your host and in-house artist, Aaron Leffler. Catch you next time on the drawing board.
That artist joining.
Of everyone joined in, and it's kind of fun. It's like a big old melting pot.